What's going on, gang? I'm Dan, Ryan, and Monji. Today we are talking about hobbying in Horus Heresy. Welcome back to the Horus Heresy. We're still working on a name podcast.
Yeah, if you've got an idea for a name, put it in the comments because
Dad Hammer is the current one.
Yeah, we're going with Dad Hammer,
and
which
the
is
only
kind
father
of
is. Yeah, exactly.
the most irresponsible one out of the group.
Yeah, right. I've got a cat.
That would explain why I ended up with kids. No. Terrible. That's not what I mean. I love my children.
With the amount of resin and kind of big items out there, the tools are different. The techniques are different. I mean, different adhesives.
All of it's different.
All of it's different.
All of it's different. I mean, I feel like sometimes when you're talking about Horus Heresy models, you need like a Bob Vila type to come in and show you what's up. Because
I'm wearing plaid next time.
Yeah, there you go. I'm wearing plaid, the West Borland method.
Right.
You know, well, you're going to see a gap because it's resin. You're not going to be able to backfill it. So you're just going to want to go ahead and reach for that tile and grout tub silicone mixture there. It fills the gaps real good. 100% under. It paints like a dream.
Right.
Yeah. Like that's Horus Heresy modeling 101. Get ready for the weird stuff.
Yeah, you're gonna watch stuff like the HGTV like home shows. You'll be like, that's a really good idea. I'll take that. That's solid.
I'll take that.
Thanks, Bob.
Instead of going, hey, you need anything at the game store, you start going, hey, you need anything from Harbor Freight?
Or Home Depot.
Yeah, I got
The amount of like Home Depot trips I started making when I got into Horus Heresy, unexpected.
Yeah, no doubt.
But
man.
refreshing?
Refreshing.
No,
No. There's no fresh to it.
there's no way you can like talk about modeling at a Home Depot. By the way, no one has any idea what you're talking about.
Absolutely. I've definitely gotten the side eye from like, what are you doing? Kind of like little blurbs from the staff there. So
Yeah.
let's kind of discuss what we need to do to kind of build a kit that we can, build our big stupid resin models with and get those on the tabletop.
Well, you're going to start with everything you already have for plastics. Because
Okay.
if you buy certain models, you're going to unfortunately have to deal with plastics and resin at the same
The
time.
hybrid kits.
The hybrid kits, right.
So the Age of Darkness box obviously didn't come with any kind of resin in it, so you can pretty much start with what you always use. Super glue, plastic glue, clippers, maybe a file, maybe some sanding sticks. a
I
razor
use
blade,
hobby knives as well.
hobby
Yeah, for sure.
knives. And, of course, if you're doing super glue, get some zip kicker. It will make your life way better, way easier.
Or make your mistakes very permanent.
That's true.
I also recommend the Bob Smith Industries super glue. You're gonna
Yeah.
find it branded in a bunch of different places.
I
but
like the super thick, so,
whatever the purple cap one
The
is, that's what I get.
I actually like the pink one. The pink.
The pink is super heavy, the purple's medium, and then the blue is like the water.
Blue is
water.
so thin. It's really good for basing though.
It is really good for basing, and it also will, burn your face. So,
Yeah. If you put enough zip kicker on enough thin, super glue, you can start a fire in cork. I tried.
Yeah. Dan sprayed it and it started smoking. It was great.
Like next to my baby. Like I was like,
Oh,
I had the
that's not
baby in the
good.
walker, and I'm like, oh, that could be cyanide. Like run out the door with it.
So pro tip, don't use super thin super glue and zip kicker. It's not a great idea.
Especially
Sometimes
next to a baby.
Sometimes you have to. The emphasis is don't do it next to a baby, right? First rule of Dad Hammer is that you try to limit your amount of time with super glues next to children. That's just a good
True.
idea.
And try and limit it, getting on your hands and stuff.
So we've seen people like super gluing a Warlord Titan together. Is that an idea that works?
No,
No.
it is tragic and scary.
You want to use something that nobody talks about, which is JB Weld. Actually.
Right. So, I build a lot of big stuff. Dan builds a lot of big stuff. Monji, of course, is
Pays
involved.
people to build his big stuff.
Right.
That's the.
I'm that guy sometimes.
I'm a big builder. Ryan's a big builder. Manji's a big spender. That's okay.
That
As
is
long
true.
as long as
we
big
all
is in the
have our-
title.
We all have our roles.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt.
So the one thing that people don't often talk about is how to bind big models together, and I'm talking stuff like Thunderhawks and Mastodons and Titans.
Super heavy tanks.
Super heavy tanks. And the thing that you really want to pick up is you want to pick up the 2-part JB Weld. There are 2 types of JB Weld. There is the long cure time, which is the red and black. They're tubes, and they have the consistency of toothpaste. And then you have the yellow and black Yeah, yellow and black variant, which is a 6-minute set time, so it's going to bind really, really fast. That's good for small stuff that you really want to have high strength. But the 6-hour stuff is really where you're going to be binding large pieces together that you're going to set with clamps and probably pins.
Clamps, like woodworking bar clamps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Preferably with the rubber ends, so when you compress it, it doesn't mar the finish on the resin or like break anything. I've definitely done that before, and then you spend time trying to repair that. It's
Good
awful.
thick rubber bands are really good for working on the flyers too, when
Right.
you're trying to keep them straight when they're setting.
Right. So the rubber bands are nice because it's compression all the way around the model whenever you set it on there. It's very nice for trying to kind of bind it all together. And also the rubber bands, if they do end up stuck in the epoxy, like they can just kind of tear off.
Yep.
You can clip it off. So the really nice part about JB Weld is that as it starts to set, you're gonna mix the two together. You're gonna whip it up together into kind of a toothpaste consistency, and then you're going to slather it on whatever you're trying to bind. But the fact that it gives you 6 hours of working time and you can start cleaning it,
Invaluable.
I mean, if you're trying to set big pieces of resin for a Thunderhawk or a Mastodon or
A Titan.
Knights or a Titan or whatever, like that's going to be the thing to really help you. And then you're just going to take Q-tips and start working that excess off. And then as it starts to kind of cure, it's going to get that kind of almost like a silicone caulking consistency, and you can just kind of scrape it off with like a blade.
Or Q-tips, you know.
Or Q-tips, but generally you really just want to use like a knife to get the excess off, and Q-tips, and that will make a very nice clean seam, and it will be basically indestructible.
And we should back this up because we jumped straight to adhesives, but really the big thing so when you're dealing with plastic kits, you don't have to straighten these guys. You don't have to worry about.
You don't have to clean them.
You don't have to really clean them either. Yeah, with resin,
there's a little bit of like sanding and
gotta get it out, give it a bath. I never give mine a bath, but that's a weird thing for me. My hands sweat so much, I basically just rub the stuff off anyway.
Sweaty dude.
I got sweaty hands,
When working with resin, definitely a big tip is Forge World resin or pretty much any model you get from Forge World that is resin is going to have release agent, right? And paint does not stick to this release agent. You'll prime it. If you just take it out of the box, build it, and then spray it, you're going to have all these areas where the paint won't stick, and you can't actually like paint over it because it literally is, I think, hydrophobic.
Right.
So like
the water-based paints will basically just kind of like coagulate together and look like runoff on a shower.
Yeah.
Weird.
Like, it creates a weird pattern,
calcium
and it ruins the finish on the model.
Yeah. Luckily, the easy thing to do is you put it in warm, soapy water. You clean it with an old toothbrush. That's all you just let it dry. That's what you've got to do to get rid of that release agent when you get the model from Forge World.
Yeah, absolutely. And then once you have that off, you're going to want to inspect all the pieces of the kit that you've gotten, especially like the big chunks, because they're traditionally not going to be straight. You're going to take it out, and your panel that's supposed to be straight is going to be like this, and you're like, oh no, the model's ruined. What do I do? So there's two ways that we've found that really can help you straighten that out. If you have a really large piece, you probably want to get a roasting pan, 2 or 3 inch deep roasting pan or a pot, and put that over a couple burners and get that going. You don't want it like rolling boil, but you definitely want it kind of simmering. You're going to submerge that entire piece in there and let it sit, maybe 2-3 minutes until it gets evenly heated, and then you can take it out and bend it back straight. And you can keep doing this. You can keep working with it. So if you don't get it right the first time, you don't want to force it. If it's feeling like it's gonna snap, don't force it. Just put it back in the hot water and keep bending it, keep working with it. The other option, of course, is a heat gun, and those are much better for smaller pieces like mechadendrites or little pieces that are kind of hanging off the model.
So big tip I will give to people when you're starting to get into the resin models, especially with like some mechadendrites, like you said, and that's what made me think about it. Most people don't get it, or if you're like shopping the Forge World website and you'll notice it, you're like, how come all these belts are straight?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's because you're supposed to get them bent the way you want them with a heat gun. which is a whole another thing. Pro tip for anybody listening, like the Thanatar you see here, that ammo belt going from the gun to the backpack doesn't come fitting. So you have to glue the belt to the backpack, glue the belt to the gun, and then heat the whole thing up and get the arm where it's supposed to be.
And consistent heat's pretty important for this. You don't want to focus like a heat gun on one spot. You want to keep it moving. You want to heat up the area generally, and then slowly bend it over.
Because I have had times where, guess what, resin will just tear on you if it gets too soft.
If it gets too
and has
hot,
too much heat on it, or
it
too much
changes
weight.
chemically, and it's a problem.
Yep.
Yeah. So it's
you can also overheat it, and then it becomes brittle, or it even catches fire. So don't do that.
Do not set your expensive resin on fire. Pro tips here from the Bolts Basement.
Yes.
Right,
Yes. Fire bad.
Fire bad.
Resin good.
So when you're working with something like a Sakaran Venator kit, what are the big things people should be aware of when they're doing these resin vehicles?
So they're typically big, heavy pieces of resin. So you want to use that water bath to straighten them out, and then for the most part you can use a combination of. I like the JB Weld solution because not only does it bind really, really strong and make a good, solid connection, but it also acts as a gap filler. So it saves you a lot of time on the back end of trying to fill those seams in and make it look really nice and no gaps and all that kind of stuff. And also, of course, just dry fit. Once you get stuff kind of straightened out, test it together, dry fit, and make sure it lines up and it looks good. Once you have kind of everything put together, use the combination of super glue. If you have small pieces that don't need a whole lot of tensile strength, use the super glue. If you have big chunky pieces that that support the model, use epoxy. That's what it's there for. And of course, pinning is always an option. You can use a drill. You can use power tools. This stuff really does kind of have the consistency of wood. It can, you can drill it, you can fill it, you can,
anybody getting started with
screws
resin,
or nails or pins in it.
That's something I always try to tell everybody when they're starting with resin. It's way more like woodworking than it is like building plastic models.
Right.
Yeah.
Something.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say something I like to tell everybody to get ready for when they're dealing with resin and getting into Horus Heresy big vehicles is hybrid kits, which is something very unique.
I was just about to ask about that.
Yeah, you were? Yeah, you remember that up? Hybrid kits are something very, very unique to Forge World and almost exclusively Horus Heresy models. Usually the bigger models. And what's going on there is that
Fire Raptors and
Fire Raptors, super heavy
Storm
tanks,
Eagles.
Storm Eagles,
the Falchion, the Fellblade.
the Falchion,
the Venator's full resin right now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I thought it was the like Deimos with the no. Okay.
No.
But
really
the old resin Deimos Rhinos and Deimos Predators.
Oh wow, those were resin and plastic back in the day.
Because it was you take the Rhino kit. You get the Rhino kit and all the resin add-ons.
So anyway, the nightmare of dealing with hybrid kits is that you have to kind of use two types of glue, or at least that's been my experience. I like to get the plastic to attach to the resin with super glue because it's easier to seam that way, because the seam is important. The resin can bend, the plastic cannot. So once you get all of that resin attached to the plastic, wherever you got resin joints, use JB Weld and you have a nice strong finish.
Yeah, and just as kind of a side note, as we had said before, you don't need to use JB Weld everywhere on the model. Use it for points that are supporting weight or are major joins in the model.
Yeah, big unions.
Yeah. Like when we were building the Thunderhawk gunship, we used JB Weld to seal the hull, the top and bottom of the hull together, and we used JB Weld on the main wings, because those are actually going to be supporting the weight of other stuff on the model.
Exactly.
If you've got things that are going to be more like not supporting weight, like the pilots on the Thunderhawk gunship, you can super glue those in, no problem.
And just a quick note on super glue. You do if you're joining flat panels together or stuff like a surface area, but not a whole lot of like kind of interlocking connections, you really do want to score it. So you take a hobby knife or an awl or something like that, and you kind of make the scratch pattern going opposite directions. And then when you put the glue on, it adds more surface area, and that lets it bind together.
Physics.
Oh,
those pesky
How
physics.
does it work?
Those pesky physics.
Right. Let's see. Oh, and a side note about the hybrid kits. You do not want to like glue the resin and plastic together and then try and heat the resin once it's on the plastic. That will absolutely warp the plastic.
Straighten your resin first. Spend
Right.
all the time straightening the resin and dry fit.
And that's because the resin and plastic have different points at which they'll start to bend, right?
Well, not only that, but at the stuff that just doesn't. So one of the things you'll run into is that there is a lot of variance in casting quality of resin because it's done by hand. This isn't some machine thing. They literally are sitting there with a rubber mold. They're literally physically pouring in resin. They're literally letting it dry.
Yeah.
Variance in the mold happens. And so little divots that are supposed to line up with little tabs that don't.
They don't quite make it.
Yeah, or you're going to have to midway through be like, I better just shave that off and go for a smooth finish. You're just going to
sometimes that
spot
happens.
the landing constantly, which is where all the dry fit before you commit kind of thing comes into play.
Right. But to Monji's point, the plastic, it reacts at a different temperature than the resin.
Yeah.
But also when you heat that ABS plastic, it's going to be uncontrollable.
ABS plastic?
I think isn't it ABS
It's
plastic?
styrene.
I don't know.
ABS is just an acronym for the chemical composure of the plastic.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So when you heat that plastic up, you're not going to be able to control it as well as, let's say, resin. It will kind of do things on its own, based on how the injection molded plastic happened, like when they made it. So you got to be really careful about how much heat you put into it.
Yeah. I mean, these guys, I have a kit bash project I'm doing right now where I'm trying to make a ferrith red loss.
Okay.
And I have a little tiny resin Dark Angel sword and wings.
Yeah.
That I trimmed out real careful and trimmed out. And I decided to use the banner from a Deathwing Knights Ancient, like the Deathwing Knights kit.
Mm-hmm.
And so the banner looks really cool, except the freaking big old iron cross symbol, elite symbol, which isn't a 30K thing, is there. So I decided to try and get the sword and wings on it.
Yeah.
And it's real thin, and I heated it up and I still need to get a brazing torch just to get it to lay down. And I know my only saving grace is going to be how thin the resin is compared to the styrene, but I'm still really worried about it.
Yeah.
So I haven't done it, just staring at me.
And that kind of brings us to the other point, and that's magnetization. When you talk about magnetizing resin, it is very, very possible, especially if you're going to invest in something like a Warlord Titan. You want to be able to switch the arms out. You want to be able to take it apart for transporting it. You want to invest in these things called Forstner bits, and what it does is it's an attachment for a drill or a drill press, and it makes a perfectly round hole that is flat on the bottom.
Yeah.
And what that's going to do is allow you to set the magnet flush into there.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you go to do that, you're probably going to want to set it with JB Weld and then kind of keep wiping it away, because the JB Weld does have iron flake in it, and the magnet, of course, is going to start moving that iron fleck and kind of stuff around. You can also just use standard epoxy that doesn't have that if you don't want to deal with it. But before you, let's say you put the epoxy into the hole that you drilled with the Forstner bit, the other thing you want to do is you want to take a very small bit and bore into the side of it, of that hole. And that way, when you put the epoxy in there and you set the magnet into it, any excess is going to have a channel to run out of.
Another important note here, when you are drilling or sanding resin, make sure you've got a respirator mask.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't breathe that stuff in.
It is toxic. It is cancerous. Do not breathe it in.
Yeah. Any kind of resin sanding, you definitely do not risk it. Wear a mask. Wear a face covering. Wear a respirator.
Yeah.
Be smart.
Health
is, longevity in this hobby is great, but you want to be healthy too.
I use the N95 construction masks that kind of wrap around the head. I've seen people do the full-on respirator, with the replaceable filters.
The cartridges.
I would say it goes to if you're using a hand file, wear just a regular dust mask. If you're going to whip out
minimum,
the thing we haven't brought up yet, when you're dremeling flash off of resin that's
Oh,
very
we
large.
already talked about cleaning resin, like the actual like, parts and stuff. So we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. But that's another point is that you do want to be mindful of the dust, especially around your pets and your kids and your family. Yep. Like do it outside, do it in the garage, like do it in an area where you have ventilation and it's not just like piling up everywhere. Make an effort to like vacuum it up periodically. Don't let it just sit everywhere.
We sacrifice our money and our time for our hobby. We don't need to sacrifice our bodies for our hobby.
True.
Like, no hobby is worth dying over.
Be smart. Which brings me to my kind of final point about dealing with resin. It is not like plastic where you can just approach it with snips. It's very tough stuff. It's very brittle. You really want to invest in, a rotary tool like a Dremel, and then of course like sanding bits and cutting bits to, fix it.
Well, and that's not to say like if you're doing infantry, trimmers are just fine. Like,
sure, it can be.
You got to be careful where the.
Yeah. So one of the things that they'll do, you'll hear the term gate. A gate is just the big hunk of resin the parts are attached to.
Yeah, right. I wish I had one to show people.
So when you get a resin piece in Forge World, you'll have the piece. It'll have like some like thick or sometimes thin like resin columns that attach to this like big hunk of resin called the gate. Now, if you are using snips, one of the things they do on the Space Marine kits, and this drives me crazy, if you take a close look at some of my Primarchs, you'll see this. They'll put the resin column that goes to the gate right on the shoulder trim.
Right.
And if you go flush to the trim and clip it off, you will break the trim.
Right. It'll take a chunk out of the trim.
Yeah.
So what you want to do with that is you definitely want to like either cut it off with a hobby saw, very close, and then sand it down, or use a Dremel and invest in a Dremel. If you're going to be doing a lot of resin work, get a Dremel. They're not super expensive. Get the little flex hose so you have like precision control and get some decent bits.
Yeah.
You're not
get ready for a mess.
And get ready for a mess.
Yeah. It's definitely a thing where if you use snippers on resin, you'll also dull the edges of the snips real quick.
Or just straight break them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So, I've done a lot of resin with these snips, and I've had a lot of luck. But those are really thick, chunky snips. They're not your average plastic.
They're not
snip.
just like straight.
Don't use your Tamiya God cutters. Don't use any of that.
Yeah, for God's sakes, don't do that. Yeah.
And even then, go out and get some of the wire cutters.
Yeah.
For really big heavy pieces.
$6 at Walmart wire cutters all day long.
Right.
Or, they look conspicuously like $50 wire cutters from Citadel.
But
very close.
It's definitely important. Like, be careful when you're snipping the resin off. It's always better to like leave a little bit of the resin column and just sand it down than to try and get it flush and work fast, because once the resin cracks or breaks, it's much more time intensive to fix.
And
it really is.
And just like any other hobby, like go find yourself, a mentor. Like if you know someone who's built, Warlord Titans or has built big stuff, like ask them to help you on your first one and kind of show you the ropes.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of videos out there. Like I have searched for stuff on YouTube, and they're just because the expense of the models or the scarcity or just like they're not popular. You can't find that very easy. Find someone who's done this and have them walk you through it. Like ask for help.
If you're in the Austin area, I'm for rent.
But it is definitely a situation where like I have benefited a lot from having Dan, from having Ryan like show me the ropes. So when I do mostly the resin infantry myself. So this is going to be things like your my Raven Guard Dark Furies are all resin. The Ultramarine Invictaris Suzerain are resin. The World Eater Red Butchers are all resin. But the core we talk about in terms of tools works as well for the small infantry as it does the big stuff.
Absolutely.
You're going to be using super glue rather than JB weld most of the time. But you're still going to be doing the sanding, you're going to be doing the cleaning, all that's still going on.
There's still gates you have to clip off. There's still, pieces that need to be sawed and cut and finished and filled. That's the other thing. You will find kind of like these little divots and bubbles and stuff in the resin where it just the quality was not great. So you do have to go back, and I use the Vallejo.
It's either authentic battle damage or you're pulling out the Vallejo.
Right. So
the Vallejo plastic putty.
Yeah, they're acrylic. The acrylic putty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it comes in this very small little tube. It has a little nozzle on the end. You cut off the nozzle, and then I use it to basically fill in like seams and gaps and stuff like
And
that.
wouldn't you know, also very toxic. One of the things about resin, every
bit of it is toxic.
every bit of it is toxic.
Actually, that one isn't toxic because it's just like water and
is
I
it
think
not?
like,
What is it? Milliput?
It's a marble
that's-
mixture, right?
it's marble dust that's like in a binder.
What
So
about
it's not-
milliput? Is milliput non-toxic?
No,
Milliput's not bad.
non-toxic. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, don't eat like a chunk of it like a candy bar, but you know.
Abba Zabba, you're my only friend.
But shout out to Austin Store King's Hobby for stocking a lot of these materials.
Yo, yeah, seriously, when you get into resin, go find you a nice model train store because they're gonna have half
yeah.
the stuff you need that
Right.
LGS won't.
And of course, for some of those bigger items, the clamps, the Dremels, the stuff like that, the big bits for Forstner bits and things like that. Go to a actual hardware store, like
A reputable one, like
a
Home
reputable
Depot
one.
or Lowe's.
Home Depot or Lowe's.
Don't go to Harbor Freight.
I don't know. Harbor Freight is I'm not trying to like take it apart like a titanium block.
Fair enough. I mean, like, you go to Harbor Freight when you're like, you want a really nice ground effect for your bass, and you're like, well, that cheap chop saw blade's gonna break up nice for a buck.
That's another thing. Go to Harbor Freight and get a 8 or 10 inch, what's it called? The metal cutting blades.
Yeah.
And you just flip that over and glue it down.
Look,
and
this is like, seems like a Titan sits right on this.
It's like a time, just right there. And you can just flip it over and glue it down.
Don't
there.
buy bamboo.
Oh my god, worst mistake I ever made. But we're not going to go into that right now because it's sad.
But when you're working with Horus Heresy, you're going to be getting exposed to a lot of non-plastic models, and it's definitely going to be scary when you start out because they're very expensive and they definitely take a lot of time to get your head around. But I actually think in the case of a lot of the resin troops, they build faster than most of the GW plastic.
Yeah, I
kits.
mean,
By a
super
lot.
glue and zip kicker, and you can knock through.
I mean, a cataphracti. Oh, you know what? I got one here. This is my favorite comparison. So if you've never seen a plastic cataphracti frame, you got a body, a bottom half of the legs, a leg, extension, the apron, head, front, back of the torso. So like your average cataphracti is about 10 bits, right?
Right.
Yeah. Inner Circle Knight Cenobium, 2 arms, a torso, and a little thing on the top. They're 4 pieces, and then the hand holding the sword.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, granted, as fast as they'll go together, you're going to spend that much time straightening the sword
Yeah.
with a heat gun.
Well, you got to put in time somewhere.
Yeah, you're going to put in time somewhere. But yeah, generally speaking, they go together way quicker.
Red Butcher is very similar. The body and the head is all one piece. You've got the arms with the axes, and like that's it. Like job's done.
Yeah.
So, don't be afraid of the complexity of a resin kit, because actually I think what you spend most of your time doing is sort of the prep work and the tooling and
Right.
and making sure that you have everything ready to actually build. Once you're there, building itself takes
Very, very quick.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's the nature of the beast. Super glue cures quicker. If you're working a 6-hour JB weld, you have some time there.
Well, I mean,
But that might be the only one.
when you're using that JB weld and you're building a big model like that, you're expecting to do it over days. It's
Sure.
not. It's probably not going to be like an afternoon project.
Like we do.
Like
Yeah.
we
yeah.
we do. Like, we do marathons, but
I mean, when we built the Thunderhawk gunship, it took about 20 hours.
it's about 20 hours to really get a good finish on it.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from that kit. So
But that was fully
thank
painted
you for
or just built?
That
thank
was
you
just
for taking
built.
that hit.
It was another 40 hours of painting.
God, Lord.
Yeah. I mean, I built my Thunderhawk in about 20 hours, but I also made it fly too. So
You did, yeah.
I did.
Pro tip when building a Thunderhawk, don't edge highlight.
I don't see. I didn't edge highlight, and I had a great time.
Not a great
I
method
think
of getting a model.
I think it
done.
works as long as you're using a 2-inch wide foam brush.
All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for our little session here on resin kits.
Hobby
and
pros and cons.
Hobby pros.
And if you have any questions about like how to work with any of the Horus Heresy kits, put them in the comments. We'll be happy to answer them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of us would. Yeah.
we've all dealt with the.
No, I would. I love talking. Obviously, I love talking.
It's true.
Yeah.
Talking generally, talking over people,
It's what I'm good at.
talking over children.
Ah, that's great. So when you become a dad, you learn.
Yeah, dad hammer.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is going to do it for our session on resin builds. I'm Ryan.
I'm Monji.
I'm Dan.
Thank thanks for tuning in, and we're out of here from the Bulls basement.
The Bulls basement.
See ya.